Commander Zix stood in front of the large glass windows of the transport ship. He looked down at the blue and green planet below. Earth. The humans called it home. Zix felt angry about his new assignment. His forearms crossed over his chest as he thought about how he got here. 3 weeks ago, Zix had been a respected warrior in the Kethvar Empire's Defense Corps. He had fought in 17 different battles across the galaxy. His thick armor-like skin had protected him from enemy fire many times. His people were known as some of the best fighters in the galaxy. But now, because of one small mistake with the human diplomats, he was being sent to their military academy. Cultural exchange program, his commander had called it. Zix knew it was really a punishment. He had laughed when the human ambassador suggested that their species could learn from each other. Humans were new to space travel. They had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. What could they possibly teach a warrior like him? The transport ship landed at the Terran Naval War College in Colorado Springs. Zix walked down the ramp, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the metal. The air was thin here in the mountains. He could smell pine trees and something else he did not recognize. Several humans waited for him near the landing pad. "Welcome to Earth, Commander Zix," said a tall human with gray hair and many medals on his uniform. "I am Colonel Sam Parker, the head of training here. This is Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan, who will be your primary instructor." The female human stepped forward. She was smaller than Zix, like all humans were, but something in her eyes made him pay attention. "We have prepared quarters for you in the alien housing section," she said. "But you will train, eat, and study with the human cadets. No special treatment." Zix nodded. He had expected this. The humans wanted to prove they were tough. He would show them what a real warrior looked like. His first day started early. Human cadets woke up before the sun rose. Zix did not need much sleep, so this was easy for him. He followed a group of young humans to the dining hall. They stared at him as he walked. Some looked afraid. Others seemed curious. A few appeared, excited to meet their first alien. "You must be our new squad member," said a human with short brown hair and friendly eyes. "I am Jake Morrison, squad leader for Charlie Company. This is Lisa Chang, our tactics specialist, and Ryan Brooks, our communications expert." Zix looked at the three humans. Jake was average height with muscles that showed he worked out regularly. Lisa was shorter with dark hair and glasses. She carried herself like someone who spent more time thinking than fighting. Ryan was tall and thin with red hair and many small scars on his hands. "I am Commander Zix of the Kethvar Empire," he said, in his deep voice. "I have been assigned to your unit for the next 6 months. Great to have you aboard," Jake said, extending his hand. Zix looked at the offered hand for a moment before shaking it with one of his forearms. The human's grip was firm, but nothing compared to Kethvar's strength. The first week was difficult for Zix, but not in the way he expected. The humans were not physically challenging. Their weapons were simple compared to Kethvar technology. Their training exercises seemed easy, but their methods confused him. In Kethvar military training, everything was direct. You found the enemy. You attacked with overwhelming force. You won or died trying. Simple and effective. Human training was different. They spent hours planning for every possible outcome. They worried about things that might go wrong. They created backup plans for their backup plans. "Why do you make everything so complicated?" Zix asked Lisa during one planning session. They were preparing for a simple combat simulation. The humans had been discussing strategy for 2 hours. Lisa looked up from her tablet. "Because things always go wrong in real combat," she said. "Our enemies are smart. They adapt. They try to surprise us. We have to be ready for anything." Zix shook his head. "In Kethvar doctrine, we rely on superior strength and better weapons. Planning is good, but too much planning makes you slow to act." "That works when you are stronger than your enemy," Ryan said from across the table. "But what if you are not? What if your enemy has better weapons, more soldiers, and knows you are coming? Then you fight harder," Zix replied. It seemed obvious to him. The humans exchanged looks. Jake leaned forward. "Commander, can I ask you something?" In all your 17 battles, were you ever the weaker force? Zix thought about this. The Kethvar Empire was powerful. They usually attacked smaller, weaker civilizations. When they fought equals, they brought enough ships and soldiers to ensure victory. No, he admitted. We do not fight unless we can win. That is smart, Lisa said. But humans do not always have that choice. Throughout our history, we have often been the smaller force. We have had to learn how to win when winning seemed impossible. This made Zix curious. He had read basic information about human history, but he had not paid much attention to their wars. That night, he accessed the Academy's database and began to read. He learned about a place called Thermopylae, where 300 humans held off thousands of enemies. He read about the Battle of Britain, where a small air force defeated a much larger one. He studied the Vietnam War, where a technologically inferior force defeated a superpower through persistence and clever tactics. The more he read, the more confused he became. These humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had developed ways to win that did not depend on having the best weapons or the most soldiers. They used tricks, deception, and strategies that no other species in the galaxy employed. During the second week, Zix participated in his first major combat simulation. The scenario was simple: defend a supply depot from attacking forces. Zix expected to be placed in the front lines where his strength and fighting skills would be most useful. Instead, Jake assigned him to a support role. Your job is to watch our flanks and report enemy movements, Jake explained. Lisa will coordinate our defense from the command center. Ryan will handle communications. Zix felt insulted. I am a combat veteran. I should be fighting, not watching. You will be fighting, Jake said calmly. But fighting smart. Trust us. The simulation began. Enemy forces attacked from 3 directions just as expected, but instead of meeting them head-on, the humans did something strange. They retreated from 2 positions while reinforcing the 3rd. They made the enemy think they were winning in some areas while secretly preparing traps. Zix watched from his position as human cadets executed a plan that seemed to make no sense. They gave up ground they could have held. They split their forces instead of concentrating them. They used their weakest weapons against the enemy's strongest points. But somehow, it worked. The attacking forces became spread out and confused. They were drawn into positions where the humans could attack them from multiple directions at once. What should have been a simple victory for the attackers became a disaster. When the simulation ended, the human team had achieved a total victory with minimal losses. Zix stared at the results on the screen. This was not how warfare was supposed to work. How? He asked Jake after the debriefing. Jake smiled. We made them think they were winning when they were actually losing. We gave them what they expected to see, then surprised them when they were not ready for it. That night, Zix lay in his quarters thinking about what he had witnessed. These humans were not the primitive species he had expected. They thought about war in ways that were completely different from anything he had learned in his military career. And somehow, their strange methods worked. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Commander Zix began to wonder if this assignment might teach him something after all. 3 weeks into his training, Zix faced the biggest test yet. Colonel Parker announced a major wargame exercise that would last for 5 days. The scenario was complex. Defend a human colony called New Haven from a massive alien invasion. The attacking force had 3 times more ships and soldiers than the defenders. This is based on a real battle from 20 years ago, Colonel Parker explained to the assembled cadets. The colony survived, but barely. Your job is to do better than the real defenders did. Zix felt confident. Finally, a proper military exercise. He expected the humans to use standard galactic defense tactics. Set up strong positions around the colony. Use their best weapons to destroy as many enemy ships as possible. Fight until the end. Jake Morrison was chosen as the overall commander for the defense. Lisa Chang would handle strategy and planning. Ryan Brooks would manage all communications between different units. A new cadet named Amy Rodriguez joined their team as intelligence coordinator. What is our plan? Zix asked during the first planning meeting. Do we concentrate our forces at the main landing sites? Do we focus on destroying their command ships first? Jake looked at the holographic display showing the colony and surrounding space. Neither, he said. We are going to make them think they are winning while we destroy them piece by piece. Zix did not understand. That makes no sense. If they think they are winning, they will keep attacking. We should show strength, not weakness. Lisa pulled up historical records on her tablet. Commander, let me show you something. This is the Battle of Stalingrad from our Second World War. The Germans had better weapons, more soldiers, and superior technology. They should have won easily. She showed him maps and battle reports. But the Russians used the city itself as a weapon. They made the Germans fight for every building, every street, every room. The stronger force became trapped and was eventually destroyed. The Germans made the mistake of thinking that taking ground meant they were winning, Amy added. But they were actually walking into a trap that got tighter every day. Zix studied the records. The tactics were unlike anything he had seen before. The defending force had deliberately allowed the enemy to advance, then used the urban environment to neutralize their advantages. This is very risky, he said. What if the trap fails? Then we adapt and try something else, Jake replied. That is what humans do. We keep changing our approach until something works. The war game began. Zix watched as the human cadets implemented their strategy. Instead of meeting the invasion fleet in open space, they allowed most of the enemy's ships to reach the planet. Instead of defending the obvious landing zones, they abandoned them and retreated to the mountains and forests. To Zix, it looked like the humans were losing badly. The enemy took control of the colony's main spaceport, industrial centers, and government buildings. Their commanders reported easy victories and requested permission to advance further inland. But Zix began to notice strange things. The enemy forces were spreading out across a huge area instead of staying concentrated. Their supply lines were getting longer and harder to protect. Most importantly, they were not finding any humans to fight. Where is everyone? He asked Ryan during the second day of the exercise. Ryan smiled and pointed to his communication equipment. Listen, he said, handing Zix a headset. Zix heard dozens of voices speaking in code. Human units were reporting enemy positions, coordinating attacks on supply convoys, and sharing intelligence about weak points in the invasion force. The humans had not retreated. They had spread out and become invisible. We call this guerrilla warfare, Lisa explained. Instead of fighting big battles we cannot win, we fight many small battles we can win. We attack when the enemy is weak and disappear when they are strong. On the third day, the strategy began to work. Enemy supply convoys came under constant attack. Their communications were jammed or intercepted. Isolated units found themselves surrounded and cut off from support. The invasion force, which had seemed unstoppable 2 days earlier, was falling apart. Amy showed Zix the intelligence reports. Look at this. The enemy commanders are confused and frustrated. They control all the important buildings, but they cannot find our main force to fight. They are starting to make mistakes. The mistakes were serious ones. Enemy units began moving without proper reconnaissance. They split their forces to chase phantom attacks. Most critically, they brought their command ships closer to the planet to improve communications with ground forces. Now we spring the real trap, Jake announced. Hidden human units that had been waiting in the mountains launched coordinated attacks on the enemy's weakest points. But these were not random strikes. Every attack was designed to force the enemy to move their forces in specific directions. The humans were herding the invasion fleet like animals. Zix watched in amazement as the enemy fleet, trying to respond to multiple crises, moved their ships into a perfect position for the humans' secret weapon. A network of defensive satellites that had been playing dead suddenly activated and caught the entire command structure in a crossfire. In less than 6 hours, the seemingly victorious invasion force was completely destroyed. The human cadets had achieved something that should have been impossible. They had defeated a superior enemy while taking minimal casualties. How did you know this would work? Zix asked Jake after the exercise ended. We did not know for sure, Jake admitted. But we studied the enemy's psychology and culture. We knew they would expect us to fight like other galactic species. When we did something completely different, they could not adapt fast enough. Lisa brought up more historical examples on her tablet. This is how humans have always fought when we were outnumbered. In Vietnam, Afghanistan, and dozens of other conflicts, we make the enemy's strength work against them. That evening, Zix sat with his human teammates in the Academy's recreation area. Other cadets were celebrating their victory, but Zix was thinking about what he had witnessed. "Ryan," he said, "you mentioned something called improvise, adapt, and overcome. What does this mean?" Ryan leaned back in his chair. "It means we never give up, even when everything goes wrong. If our weapons break, we find new weapons. If our plan fails, we make a new plan. If our communications are cut, we find other ways to coordinate." Amy nodded. "Human soldiers are trained to function independently. Every person in our military can think, plan, and make decisions. We do not just follow orders. We understand the mission and find ways to complete it even if everything changes." Zix realized this was completely different from Kethvar military doctrine. His people were excellent soldiers, but they depended on clear command structures and established procedures. If their officers were killed or their communications failed, units became confused and ineffective. "What happens if a human unit loses contact with their commanders?" he asked. "They keep fighting," Lisa said simply. "Every human soldier knows the overall mission objectives. They can work together to achieve the goal even without specific orders." This concept troubled Zix. It meant that human military forces could continue to function even after suffering catastrophic losses. They could adapt to situations that would paralyze other armies. They could turn defeats into victories by changing the rules of engagement. As he returned to his quarters that night, Zix began to understand why humanity had risen so quickly in galactic politics. Their military thinking was not just different from other species. It was more advanced. They had spent centuries learning to win impossible battles against equally clever opponents. For the first time in his military career, Commander Zix felt like a student instead of a teacher. After the successful war game, Zix expected the training to become easier. He was wrong. The human instructors seemed determined to push their students beyond normal limits. Each new exercise was more challenging than the last. "Today we will practice something different," announced Captain Ben Walsh, the Academy's ship combat instructor. He was an older human with gray hair and scars on his face that told stories of real battles. "You will command obsolete ships with broken equipment against a modern fleet." Zix looked at the simulation parameters on his screen. The human cadets would control 3 old patrol ships with damaged weapons and failing engines. Their opponents had 12 modern warships with superior firepower and speed. The odds were ridiculous. "This is not realistic," Zix protested. "No commander would accept such a mission." Captain Walsh smiled grimly. "Commander, let me tell you about the Battle of Samar during our Second World War. A small group of American destroyers and escort carriers faced the largest battleships in the Japanese fleet. By all logic, they should have been destroyed in minutes." He activated a holographic display showing the historical battle. The Americans were outnumbered, outgunned, and caught by surprise. But they did something the Japanese never expected. Instead of running away, they attacked. Zix watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The smaller American ships had charged directly at the massive Japanese battleships. They used smoke screens, torpedo attacks, and sheer aggression to confuse and scatter a force 10 times their size. The Japanese commanders could not believe what they were seeing. Captain Walsh continued. They thought it was a trap. No one would be crazy enough to attack such odds unless they had hidden reinforcements. So they retreated. Lisa Chang raised her hand. "Sir, how is this relevant to space combat?" "Same principles apply," the captain replied. "Your enemy expects you to behave logically. When you do something completely unexpected, they assume you know something they do not. This gives you a psychological advantage." The simulation began. Jake Morrison took command of the small human fleet. Amy Rodriguez handled tactical coordination. Ryan Brooks managed electronic warfare. Zix was assigned to weapons control on the lead ship. "What is our strategy?" Zix asked as enemy ships appeared on the scanner. "We are going to convince them we are more dangerous than we actually are," Jake replied. "All ships, close to attack range. Maximum speed." Zix could not believe what he was hearing. "That is suicide. Our weapons cannot penetrate their shields at long range. Getting closer will only make it easier for them to destroy us." "Trust me," Jake said calmly. "Amy, begin electronic countermeasures. Make our ships look like they have more firepower than they do. Ryan, jam their communications, but let some fake messages get through." The 3 human ships accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Zix watched the tactical display with horror. They were flying directly into a kill zone where 12 enemy ships could concentrate their fire. But strange things began to happen. Ryan's electronic warfare created false sensor readings that made the human ships appear larger and more heavily armed. Amy's tactical programs generated fake missile launches and phantom energy signatures. Most importantly, carefully crafted false communications suggested that a much larger human fleet was approaching from another direction. The enemy fleet responded exactly as Captain Walsh had predicted. Faced with what appeared to be a reckless, frontal assault, their commanders assumed it was a diversion for a larger attack. They began repositioning their ships to face the phantom fleet that did not exist. "Now," Jake ordered, "hit their command ship with everything we have." The 3 human ships concentrated their limited firepower on a single target. Their obsolete weapons should not have been able to damage the enemy flagship, but the humans had found its weak point. A concentrated attack on the ship's sensor array left it blind and unable to coordinate the rest of the fleet. Without their command ship providing targeting data, the enemy fleet began firing at shadows and false contacts. The human ships used their superior maneuverability to stay out of range while picking off isolated targets. In 30 minutes, they had destroyed or disabled 8 enemy ships. "Exercise complete," Captain Walsh announced. "Human fleet achieves tactical victory." Zix stared at the results in disbelief. "How is this possible? We had inferior ships and weapons." "We had superior tactics and psychology," Lisa explained. "We made them fight the battle we wanted instead of the battle they planned." After the simulation, Zix approached Captain Walsh privately. "Sir, I have studied galactic military history for many years. I have never seen tactics like these. Where do humans learn such methods?" The captain's expression became serious. "Commander, humans have been fighting wars against other humans for thousands of years. Our enemies were always as smart as we were, sometimes smarter. We could not rely on superior technology or overwhelming numbers because our opponents had access to the same resources we did." He pulled up records from human history on his tablet. "Every human military innovation was developed because we faced opponents who could match us in every conventional way. We learned to be unpredictable because predictable armies were destroyed. We learned to fight with inferior equipment because superior equipment was not always available." Zix studied the historical records. Human warfare was incredibly complex compared to galactic conflicts. Most alien species fought wars against clearly inferior or superior opponents. Humans had spent centuries fighting enemies who were roughly equivalent in capability. "This created an arms race of ideas," Captain Walsh continued. "Every new tactic was quickly countered, forcing the development of even newer tactics. After thousands of years of this, human military doctrine became incredibly sophisticated." Over the following weeks, Zix participated in increasingly difficult exercises. Each one demonstrated another aspect of human military thinking that violated galactic norms. In one exercise, the humans successfully defended a space station by pretending it was abandoned, then using it as a trap to destroy attacking forces. In another, they turned a defeat into victory by convincing the enemy that their retreat was actually an advance in a different direction. The most shocking exercise involved what humans called acceptable losses. The scenario required defending a civilian population center from orbital bombardment. Standard galactic doctrine called for concentrating all defensive forces around the most important targets. Instead, Jake Morrison developed a strategy that deliberately sacrificed some areas to save others. "We cannot protect everyone," he explained to Zix, "but we can save more lives by choosing what to defend and what to abandon." This concept deeply disturbed Zix. In Kethvar culture, all citizens were considered equally valuable. The idea of deliberately allowing some to die to save others seemed morally wrong. "How do you make such choices?" he asked Amy Rodriguez after the exercise. "It is the hardest part of command," she replied quietly. "But sometimes choosing who lives and who dies is better than letting everyone die. We study mathematics, psychology, and ethics to make these decisions as fairly as possible." Lisa showed him the casualty projections. "If we had tried to defend everything equally, we would have saved only 30% of the population. By concentrating our forces strategically, we saved 70%. Zix realized that human military thinking included moral and ethical calculations that other species avoided. They had developed systematic methods for making impossible choices under extreme pressure. During his evening study sessions, Zix researched more human military philosophy. He learned about concepts like total war, where entire civilizations committed all their resources to conflict. He studied deterrence theory, where the threat of massive retaliation prevented wars from starting. Most disturbing was the human concept of mutually assured destruction. Humans had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, then used the threat of planetary suicide to maintain peace. No other species in the galaxy had ever created such a paradox. "You developed weapons that could kill everyone, then used them to prevent killing anyone?" Zix asked Ryan during one of their discussions. "It worked," Ryan replied with a shrug. "For over 60 years, the fear of total destruction kept major wars from happening. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to make sure it never starts." As his third month at the academy progressed, Zix began to understand that human military doctrine was not just different from galactic norms. It was more advanced in ways that were almost incomprehensible to other species. Humans had learned to fight wars that could not be won through conventional means. They had developed strategies for conflicts where victory seemed impossible. Most importantly, they had created military thinking that assumed their enemies were just as intelligent and creative as they were. This realization was both exciting and terrifying for Zix. If humans could develop such sophisticated military capabilities in isolation, what would they accomplish now that they had access to galactic technology and resources? The final month at the academy brought the ultimate test. Colonel Parker announced the graduation exercise that would determine who passed and who failed. The scenario was based on a real crisis happening at the edge of galactic space. 3 months ago, the hegemony received a distress signal from the Kepler colony. Colonel Parker explained to the assembled cadets. "A hostile alien alliance called the Void Seekers has surrounded the system. They have superior numbers, better technology, and strategic advantages. All previous rescue attempts have failed." He activated a massive holographic display showing the star system. "Your mission is to break the siege and evacuate 1 million civilians. You have limited ships, outdated equipment, and no reinforcements coming. The real military commanders have declared this mission impossible." Zix felt his stomach tighten. He recognized the tactical situation from intelligence reports. The Void Seekers were a confederation of aggressive species that had been expanding their territory for decades. They were known for their ruthless efficiency and advanced weapons. "Who will command this operation?" asked a cadet from Delta Company. "Jake Morrison will be overall commander," Colonel Parker replied. "He can choose his own staff from any of the graduating cadets." Jake stood up and looked around the room. "I choose Lisa Chang as strategic coordinator, Amy Rodriguez as intelligence chief, Ryan Brooks as communications director, and Commander Zix as my second in command." Zix was shocked. In 6 months, he had gone from looking down on these humans to being chosen as deputy commander for the most important exercise of their training. The planning phase took 3 days. Zix watched as the human cadets analyzed every aspect of the situation. They studied Void Seeker psychology, technology, and past battle tactics. They examined the colony's defenses, population distribution, and available resources. The conventional approach is to fight our way through their blockade, Lisa explained during the first strategy meeting. But their fleet is 3 times larger than ours. A direct assault would fail. What about a surprise attack? Suggested Amy. We could try to disable their command ships before they can coordinate a response. Ryan shook his head. Their sensors are too good. They would detect us long before we got close enough to do real damage. Jake studied the tactical display for a long time. We are thinking about this wrong, he finally said. We are trying to win a military victory against a superior force. But that is not really our mission. What do you mean? Zix asked. Our mission is to evacuate civilians, not destroy the enemy fleet, Jake replied. What if we could accomplish the evacuation without fighting the main battle? Lisa's eyes lit up with understanding. You want to make them fight a different war than the one they prepared for. Over the next 2 days, the human team developed a strategy that was unlike anything Zix had ever seen. Instead of trying to defeat the Void Seekers in conventional combat, they would exploit weaknesses in the enemy's psychology and organization. The Void Seekers are a confederation, Amy explained. 7 different species working together. They have different goals, different fighting styles, and different ideas about how to conduct this siege. Their unity is their strength, Jake added. But it is also their weakness. If we can create distrust between their species, their alliance might collapse. The plan was incredibly complex. It involved fake intelligence operations, psychological warfare, deception tactics, and precisely timed military strikes. Most importantly, it required the human team to think like their enemies and predict how they would react to various provocations. This is very risky, Zix warned during the final planning session. If any part of this plan fails, the entire operation could collapse. We might make the situation worse instead of better. That is true, Jake admitted. But the conventional approach has already been tried and failed. Sometimes you have to take big risks to achieve big results. The exercise began with what appeared to be a standard rescue attempt. Human ships approached the Kepler system along predictable routes. The Void Seekers moved to intercept them, confident in their ability to repel another futile attack. But the approaching ships were not the real rescue fleet. They were unmanned decoys loaded with fake communication equipment and programmed to send misleading signals. While the enemy focused on these obvious targets, the real human fleet took position in the system's asteroid belt. Phase 2 involved information warfare. Ryan Brooks and his communications team began broadcasting fake messages between Void Seeker commanders. The messages suggested that some species in the Alliance were planning to keep the colony's resources for themselves instead of sharing them. Equally, Amy Rodriguez coordinated intelligence operations that planted evidence supporting these false accusations. Fake supply records, altered communication logs, and modified battle reports were introduced into enemy information networks through sophisticated computer intrusions. It is working, Lisa reported after 2 days of the exercise. Void Seeker, unity is breaking down. 3 species have accused each other of betrayal. Their fleet is splitting up to protect their individual interests. But the humans were not finished. Jake Morrison ordered small, precise attacks on enemy supply lines and communication stations. These strikes were designed to look like they came from rival Void Seeker factions rather than human forces. Each species thinks the others are sabotaging the operation, Amy explained to Zix as they watched enemy fleet movements. They are so busy fighting each other that they have forgotten about defending against us. The final phase was the most dangerous. With the Void Seeker Alliance in chaos, Jake ordered the real evacuation to begin. Transport ships emerged from the asteroid belt and began landing on the colony's surface. But this operation had to be completed before the enemy realized what was happening. We have maybe 6 hours before they figure out our deception, Lisa warned. After that, they will reunite and destroy our evacuation fleet. Zix found himself coordinating the most complex military operation he had ever participated in. Human ships provided cover for the transports while simultaneously maintaining the illusion that Void Seeker factions were attacking each other. It required split-second timing and perfect communication between dozens of units. Enemy forces are beginning to coordinate again, Ryan reported during the final hour. Species 4 and Species 7 have resolved their dispute. They are moving to attack our evacuation zone. How many civilians are still on the surface? Jake asked. 40,000. Amy replied. We need at least 2 more hours to get everyone out. Jake made a decision that shocked Zix. Instead of retreating with the people they had already saved, he ordered the fleet to continue the evacuation, while preparing for a last stand against overwhelming odds. We are not leaving anyone behind, Jake declared. All ships maintain position. Continue loading civilians until the last possible moment. The final battle was brief, but intense. Void Seeker forces that had realized the deception attacked with everything they had, but they were too late. The last transport ship escaped just as enemy fire began hitting the evacuation zone. Exercise complete, announced Colonel Parker over the communication system. Total civilian evacuation successful. Enemy alliance disrupted. Mission objectives exceeded. Zix stared at the final results. Not only had the human team achieved the impossible evacuation, but they had also permanently damaged the Void Seeker Confederation. Several enemy species had withdrawn from the alliance, believing they had been betrayed by their partners. How did you know this would work? Zix asked Jake after the debriefing. We did not know, Jake replied honestly, but we understood that our enemies had weaknesses beyond their military capabilities. We exploited their psychology instead of attacking their ships. That evening, as the graduation ceremony approached, Zix sat alone in his quarters writing his final report to Kethvar. Command. He struggled to find words that could adequately describe what he had learned. The humans had not just taught him new tactics or strategies. They had shown him an entirely different way of thinking about conflict, leadership, and victory. Their approach to warfare was not based on superior strength or technology, but on superior understanding of their enemies and themselves. At the graduation ceremony, Colonel Parker addressed the cadets one final time. You have learned that true victory comes not from having the best weapons, but from using whatever weapons you have in the smartest way possible. You have learned that the greatest strength is the ability to adapt when everything goes wrong. As Zix received his graduation certificate, he realized that his 6 months on Earth had changed him completely. He was no longer just a Kethvar warrior. He had become something new, a student of human military thinking. When he returned to his fleet assignment, Zix would carry with him knowledge that could revolutionize galactic warfare. But more importantly, he would carry the understanding that humanity was not just another species in the galactic community. They were teachers who had learned their lessons through thousands of years of fighting the most dangerous opponents in the universe, themselves.